You think prejudice looks like hatred, a racist shout, a mob with torches, an obvious villain. But what if the most dangerous prejudice doesn't look like hatred at all? What if it looks like ordinary people doing what because history contains a disturbing pattern? People rarely wake up and decide to become unjust. Instead, they inherit beliefs. They inherit fears. They inherit stories about who belongs and who doesn't. And once enough people believe the same story, it starts feeling like common sense, even when it's wrong. You think prejudice looks obvious. A hateful face, a cruel voice, someone openly saying, "I don't like people like you." But what if that's the easiest kind of prejudice to recognize? What if the dangerous kind sounds reasonable? That's just how things are. Everyone knows. I'm just being realistic. Those sentences have existed for centuries, and they've helped ordinary people justify extraordinary injustice. Here's the uncomfortable part. You probably believe you would have stood beside Atticus Finch. Most people do. But the people standing against him also believed they were right. That's what makes To Kill a Mockingbird so unsettling. It isn't asking whether evil exists. It's asking something much harder. How does an ordinary person become blind to another person's humanity? Stay with this story, because by the end, you may stop asking whether you're prejudiced and start asking where your own mind has already made someone guilty before you ever knew them. You think prejudice looks obvious. A hateful face, a cruel voice, someone openly saying, "I don't like people like you." But what if that's the easiest kind of prejudice to recognize? What if the dangerous kind sounds reasonable? That's just how things are. Everyone knows. I'm just being realistic. Those sentences have existed for centuries, and they've helped ordinary people justify extraordinary injustice. Here's the uncomfortable part. You probably believe you would have stood beside Atticus Finch. Most people do. But the people standing against him also believed they were right. That's what makes To Kill a Mockingbird so unsettling. It isn't asking whether evil exists. It's asking something much harder. How does an ordinary person become blind to another person's humanity? Stay with this story, because by the end, you may stop asking whether you're prejudiced and start asking where your own mind has already made someone guilty before you ever knew them. How can good people participate in injustice without believing they are doing anything wrong? You probably believe you would have stood on the right side of history. But what if the most dangerous prejudice isn't hatred, but the ability to convince yourself that you're being reasonable? Prejudice disguised as normality. Because once injustice becomes normal, people don't need to be forced to participate. They simply follow the rules of the world they inherited. The most dangerous prejudice isn't hatred. It's the ability to look at an injustice and say, "That's just how things are." And if you believe you would have been different, this is your wake-up call. The enemy is not a monster who wears a mask. The enemy is a system of belief so ingrained that it becomes invisible. It is the simple, unspoken agreement that society is simply normal. Here, we meet our first psychological archetype. Why do ordinary people accept injustice when everyone around them accepts it too? Because prejudice rarely arrives looking evil. It arrives looking normal, reasonable, traditional, familiar. Before we meet Atticus, meet Daniel. Daniel starts a new job. On his first day, Everyone warns him about one coworker. Don't trust Marcus. He's difficult. Nobody likes working with him. By lunchtime, Daniel hasn't spoken to Marcus yet. But something strange has already happened. His brain has. When Marcus walks past, Daniel notices every cold expression, every awkward silence, every mistake. He ignores everything that doesn't fit the story. By the end of the week, Daniel is convinced Marcus is exactly who everyone said he was. Then one evening, they accidentally work late together. For the first time, they actually talk. Marcus isn't cold. He's exhausted. His wife has been in the hospital for months. The man Daniel thought he knew never actually existed. Only the story did. That's where To Kill a Mockingbird begins. Not with hatred, with assumptions. Scout Finch grows up believing adults understand the world. Children assume something dangerous. Those grown-ups know what they're doing. But Scout slowly discovers something else. Adults inherit stories long before they inherit facts. Maycomb isn't just a town. It's a machine. Everyone knows where everyone belongs. Who deserves respect? Who deserves suspicion? Who deserves silence? Nobody calls it prejudice. They call it normal. That's how systems survive. Not because everyone consciously agrees. Because people stop questioning what everyone already accepts. The most dangerous prejudice doesn't begin with hatred. It begins with borrowed certainty. Then comes Atticus. People admire him because he's courageous. I think they are missing something. His greatest strength isn't bravery. It's perception. He sees people before labels. One sentence quietly changes everything. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. Most people feel empathy. I hear cognitive science because psychologists now know something fascinating. Our brains create shortcuts. They are efficient. They help us survive. They also help us stereotype. The sooner the judgment, the less information we actually use. Atticus fights something invisible. Automatic judgment. Then everything changes. Tom Robinson enters the story. Most people remember the courtroom. Look closer. The verdict isn't really decided there. It was decided much earlier. Inside people's minds. Evidence becomes secondary. Identity becomes primary. And here's where this becomes frighteningly modern. Think about social media. One headline, one clip, one screenshot. How often do people decide before they investigate? Our brains love certainty, especially social certainty. If everyone already believes something, questioning it becomes psychologically expensive. That's called conformity pressure. History is full of moments where people weren't forced into agreement. They drifted into it. People rarely wake up wanting to become unjust. They wake up wanting to belong. This is where the novel becomes even more uncomfortable. Mayella isn't easily categorized. Victim. Manipulator, trapped, lonely, afraid. She's psychologically complicated. That's exactly why she's important. Real life rarely gives us perfect villains. Sometimes broken people help create broken systems. That doesn't erase responsibility. It explains complexity. Our minds prefer simple stories. Reality rarely cooperates. Then Kafka-like symbolism appears. Boo Radley. The monster everyone invents. Notice something. Almost nobody actually knows him. They know stories, rumors, whispers. Children imagine him. Adults reinforce him. The myth becomes more real than the person, until reality quietly interrupts fiction. Boo saves lives. The invisible man becomes the human one. Fear grows fastest in places where understanding never enters. Think about today. The quiet coworker, the immigrant, the wealthy executive, the homeless stranger, the neighbor you never speak to, the person whose politics you assume explains their entire personality. How many people have you already summarized? Our brains compress people. Labels save energy. Empathy costs attention. That's why prejudice survives. Not because humans enjoy cruelty, because certainty feels easier than curiosity. Then the title finally reveals itself. People think the mockingbird symbolizes innocence. It does. But psychologically, it represents something deeper. The part of another human being that never received a fair chance to be seen. Every time we reduce someone to one label, we stop listening. Every time we inherit someone else's judgment, we stop investigating. Every time belonging becomes more important than truth, another mockingbird falls silent. Think back to Daniel. He judged Marcus before knowing him. Scout judged Boo before seeing him. Maycomb judged Tom before hearing him. Different people, different lives, one pattern, borrowed certainty. So here's the question, note. Am I prejudiced? That's too easy. Ask something harder. Who have I already decided I understand, without ever really seeing them? Because the greatest warning inside to kill a mockingbird isn't that evil exists. It's that ordinary people can mistake familiarity for truth, assumption for evidence, and belonging to justice. And maybe the next mockingbird isn't waiting inside a novel. Maybe it's someone you've already passed, without ever learning their song. Here's an added middle section and an extended conclusion, written in the same voice and rhythm. Asterisk asterisk added middle section. Insert after, because certainty feels easier than curiosity. Asterisk asterisk, but there's something worse than judging. Something quieter. Something almost invisible, silence. Not the silence of someone who doesn't know. The silence of someone who does. Who sees it happen. Who feels the small pull in their chest. And says nothing. Because speaking costs something. A friendship. A reputation. A seat at the table where everyone already agrees. Think about Maycomb again. Not the jury. Not the men outside the jail. The neighbors. The churchgoers. The women pouring tea on porches. Who whispered it's a shame and changed the subject. They didn't build the system. They maintained it. With politeness. With avoidance. With the gentle, deadly sentence, "It's not my place." Psychologists call it the bystander effect. But that phrase feels too clinical, too safe. What it really means is this. The more people who could speak, the less any single person feels they must. Responsibility dissolves into the crowd. And injustice doesn't need everyone to agree. It only needs enough people to look away at the same time. Atticus knows this. That's why he doesn't just defend Tom. He makes the town watch. He forces eyes open. Not with rage. With procedure. With questions. With the slow, unbearable act of making people sit in a room and hear what they already know, spoken aloud, Because the opposite of prejudice isn't courage. It's attention. The willingness to look when looking is inconvenient. And here's what no one tells you. You won't get a courtroom moment. No judge will call your name. No jury will watch you decide. The test won't be dramatic. It will be a Tuesday. A conversation at dinner where someone summarizes a group of people. And everyone nods. And you feel the small flicker. The one that says, wait. That's not the whole story. And you'll have 2 seconds. Maybe 3. To speak. Or to smile. And let it pass. That's where it lives now. Not in torches. Not in shouts. In the pause before you agree with a room. In the half-second where you choose curiosity over comfort. You don't have to be Atticus. You don't have to stand alone in front of a jail. You just have to refuse to finish someone else's sentence about a person you've never met. That's the work, small, unseen, unapplauded. But every mockingbird that ever sang because one person stopped long enough to listen. So the next time someone hands you a story about who someone is, before you've ever met them, hold it. Turn it over. Ask the question that costs something. Is this true? Or is this just familiar? Because the world doesn't change in courtrooms first. It changes in the quiet moment. When one ordinary person decides not to inherit what they were never meant to carry. That's not heroism. That's just seeing. And maybe that was always enough.